Okay, good morning again. Today we're going to look at usability and understanding what look and feel is all about. Let's start. So let's talk about the usability. So what is usability? Usability is concerned with making systems easy to learn and easy to use. This can lead to improved performance in the workforce. It's simple. Think about an action that you do all of the time. If you have to think about how the user will use it, or the user has to stop and think about how to use what you have made, then you're wasting time. Remember the example of the photocopy machine. We all know what a photocopy machine does. It photocopies something that you put in it. And generally, they have one green large button because the machine itself is telling the user what it does. It's a photocopy machine. And the green button is basically inviting the user to click it. So the user doesn't have to waste time. If you think about modern photocopy machines instead, they have been all loaded with a lot more features like photocopy, scan, do characters recognition. So it becomes a lot more complex, and you start seeing that the usability is actually decreased in exchange for more features. So that's not always a good thing. It really depends on what it is that you're trying to build. So fully designed interfaces can require user extra effort, which we're trying to avoid, can cause misuse or non-use at all, or tend to errors and perhaps failures. And keep in mind one thing, user-friendliness is different from usability. So factors that have the most influence on usability are visibility and affordance. Visibility and affordance help the user interpret and predict the effect of particular actions. They can be learned, but in truly intuitive systems, the visibility and affordance are innate. We go back to the photocopy machine. Think about what the user has to do and how much the machine can actually help the user to understand how to use it without doing explanation. So if you think about the workforce, if you have to teach a user to use the application, you are actually spending money because you have to teach the person to use it. So that's where you have to keep in consideration training time if you are planning to do something more complex. So it happens normally. For example, I bought a very complicated coffee machine that requires cleaning every day. So I had to go and teach all of my staff how to use that machine. So this is a $1,000 machine. Previously, we had a simple Nespresso machine which was only able to do one single thing, which is you put coffee in, coffee comes out. So it wasn't requiring any special training or anything. Now I have to teach my staff how to clean it. In exchange, we get what? We can make cappuccinos, we can make fresh coffee instead of just the capsules. So we have reasons for it. The controls, which are the interaction elements used in an interface, need to be visible. So they need to be identifiable and to the user with good mapping relationships with their effects. The photocopy machine, the big green button, possibly with a start or with a photocopy icon on it. Visibility means that the user can distinguish between interaction elements and decoration. Once again, the big green button. You go to the photocopy machine and you just look around, you see it, click, done. So the appearance of controls must afford suggests their functionality, the way they work. So imagine the green button, of course, it tells you straight away that that button is there for one reason, to make things happen. A red button generally means that you want to stop something from happening or something that is happening, like an alarm system. So let's have a look at some examples. So this was a sign that we put in one of our buildings. It tells you that there are level 1, level 2, and level 3. Now, there's a problem here. On which level are you? Or if you go into an elevator, are you going to ground level or are you going to defer to level 1? Remember in the previous lessons we talked about cultural differences. So for example, in Australia we don't have, or we do have, no I'm not sure even, we have a level 1 which is generally the ground floor. In other places the ground floor is the G floor. So this is a completely different thing. Now, and this will imply issues as well. So what is one way of finding out? Well, possibly you can tell the user that the ground floor is the first floor. So, or like you can put exit next to it. But in this case, this sign, what does it tell you? Does it tell you how to get to that place? Do you need to go up or do you need to go down? What if level 1 is instead on top instead of being at the bottom? What if you get into those really complex buildings where you have level 0 and then you have -1, -2, -3? Because that could happen as well. So this sign doesn't really help the user. This is a problem. So the current level is denoted by the frame around the floor number. That's something that you could have, like you see level 1, level 2, level 3. If you are on level 2, maybe you can highlight that you're on level 2. So that's something where we can use visibility to distinguish between the interaction elements. So affordance relates to whether I know what to do to reach my goal. Can I predict what will happen when I interact? So this is a thing, and we'll see in the next picture. For example, there's a button. You know that the button requires you to push it to make something happen. Then we have the switch. You know that the switch goes up and down. You have the knob, which is to rotate. So there are things that are inferred. And what is the feedback in this case? The feedback is the light that turns on. So this is one of the very simple interaction examples. But let's have a look at something which you might think it's simple, but it's not as straightforward. And this can happen quite often. How does this tap work? It's a tap. It's not that much different from a light. But how does it work? Which way do you need to turn it? How do you press it? Do you turn it? Do you pull it? So this is problematic because you don't actually know how to make it work, and you have to go by experience. You have to go and try and trial and maybe get some errors. So you can go and have a look at some other examples, and you can see, for example, if this website is visible and what is the affordance to it. So I'll leave this for you for the prac. Now, let's have a look at the actual design process. So generally, as for many things in a given system, we use the waterfall model, or we try. Waterfall model is one of the many models that we can use. What does a waterfall model imply? It implies that you start and then it keeps cascading down onto the next one, generally with little interaction between multiple layers. Generally, the top layer only talks to the bottom layer. So once you do the analysis, then you go in design. When you have done the design, your outcome is a design, and that will go to the developers who are going to code it. Then once it's coded, the application gets given to the testers, which they test it. And after that, the documentation gets done. And really the only thing which talks to everything is the maintenance. Now this is one straightforward model, but this one doesn't take into consideration the cyclic nature of it. So we generally have to go and add cyclic to it. Cyclic means that we do iterations. We do one after the other. So the waterfall models focuses on the technology. It reflects the views of the developer, which is why nowadays it's not so used much anymore, because nowadays we plan on using design a lot more than we do straight development. So it is very technical, and the processes are restricted by being strictly sequential. No parallel or iteration opportunities. Like I said, it's sequential. You go from the top to the bottom, and you never go back up unless you are a salmon. It requires the designer to get it right the first time, and this is actually a very bad thing for designers, because often you don't have the answer straight away. But if you are in an old company, it might happen that people actually do this. So you are paid as a designer, you design, and then you give it to the next person in charge. What happens if you made a mistake? Well, hopefully there is money to allocate to redesign again. But if that wasn't the case, then you might be stuck and you end up with a product which is not finished. So, user-centered design involves users as much as possible, and that is why the waterfall model doesn't really work. Because users have to interact with what you're building. You can try to sell them the moon, but it's very likely that by the end of the project, you realize that your customers do not want the moon, they just want a coffee machine. So UCD uses a lot of expertise, and that's both expertise from many fields, but also expertise that you build through experience. In UXD, you have everything. You have people who are just UX researchers. You have plenty of different tools. You can use consultants. You can use experts. So plenty of pieces that make up the UX design. I have worked for IBM, the Interactive Studio, which is a design-only studio. And that took about 10 people to come out with a solution. And those were people from every different kind of work. We had straightforward designers, we had customer experience designers, we had user experience designers, we had an anthropologist who is very dedicated to people. So these things exist, and they're very articulated. They're very complex. It's an iterative process. What is an iterative process? It's a process that you go forward by little circles. So you build and then you evaluate. And based on that evaluation, you then go back into the next round. So you build, evaluate, and then you ideate. Build, evaluate, ideate. You continue this until you reach your final stage, which is your perfect outcome. It is either that, or you have run out of resources, because you can't keep paying designers forever. So you need to put this into consideration. Anything which is iterative doesn't mean that you will get it right the first time. Hopefully 3-4 times is how much you want to be in for, and you need to kind of save yourself. So maybe you say 4 iterations is what I need. Let's stay safe and make 6 iterations. Means that you probably want to charge your customer for 10 iterations just to be sure. So let's have a look at the actual star model. I probably should have made this a little bit faster. So we have the test analysis first, where we try to understand the functional analysis. What is it that our application has to do? So let's say that, for example, our application has to log in. You need a login. So what is the requirement? The requirement is you must have a login function. You must have username and password. So those are specification. Conceptual design is probably just the actual sketch for what it will look like. And then you have your prototype, and then your implementation. So this is an iterative process. Okay, you can probably skip the rest. So if you look at this model, how is UCD represented? How do designers move between the different parts of the model? And is there a particular task in the model that appears very important? What is it? Why is it very important? The most important part is the evaluation. Because you can evaluate all pieces. You don't have to go and implement before you test it. Because that is what we try to do. Let's say that you do the functional analysis. Are you going to implement it to see if it works? No. That's actually the last thing in that circle. So you want to go and evaluate, maybe with the expert, and say, is this correct? And then you go back again. And then you go, okay, so now I know that I must have a login. What are the requirements for the login? And this seems very straightforward, but it is not. If you have built on login mechanism, you will find that, especially if you work with people from different backgrounds, your login will work very differently. So are you going to be using something like a Facebook or a WeChat login? Or are you going in for a standard login? Are you going to need things such as CAPTCHAs to find out if the person is real? So there's quite a lot of work that goes into this. Okay, now chapter 5 is mostly about the star model. So because it's a number of videos, what I will do, I will just not comment on the videos, but you can go through them in your own time, so you can save a little bit of time on this. And we move directly into design. So let's imagine this part. Where do ideas come from? First of all, imagination, observations of current work practice, observations of current systems, or what mostly happens is borrowed from other fields. So animation, theater, information displays, graphic communication, architecture. When we think about ideas as designers, we need to learn and what are the things that look good for us and we can replicate or modify a little so that we can use them in our own projects. This is a skill that is extremely important for designers, because we don't want to keep reinventing the wheel over and over and over again. We are not doing the work of an artist, for example. Our job is not to create something from scratch, but to satisfy a particular need, to satisfy a problem, to solve a problem, to come up with a solution. And over the years, solutions have come up for a lot of different problems. So it is very important that we don't waste our time in trying to reinvent things. When we find something that we think is good, we should make a point. Maybe we add it into our own page. Me, personally, I add it onto my Pinterest page. So if you look at my Pinterest page, you will see that there are a lot of things such as UI features, dashboards, and that's because I have worked on a lot of dashboards in the past. So I was borrowing ideas from those. So usability is an attribute of a system, is cumulative, is directly linked to software quality, both actual and perceived, is directly linked to software acceptability, and is inversely related to software complexity. What does inversely related mean? It means that the more complex the application is, then the easier it should be, in a nutshell. If you're making the software both complex and also the usability is very low, then you have an issue. So we are striving for greater user acceptance, possibly leads to increase the sales, because it will happen very often that the application that we're building might have already been created by other people. So what stands out? Something has to be different, otherwise people will use the other application and not ours. We go back to the most clear example, for example, Tinder. I use Tinder because their swapping mechanism is what changed a huge amount of things online. So before Tinder, everything was profile based and people had to go and look, and instead Tinder came and said, oh, what do users want? And that is kind of bad to say, but users want, first of all, to find the good looking partner. So they're not really interested in all of the other things. And that's how they solve the problem. They say, okay, looks good right, doesn't look good left. And so they increase what? They increase the sales, because now it takes, if you have 200 selections a day, you probably have found those videos online on Youku, on YouTube, where people just swipe as quickly as possible. It means that you're going to run out of credit extremely soon, and those people who find some positive response will go and buy more credits so they can keep on swiping forever. So that's a very clear example of how usability transforms into sales. Reduce training cost. Same, left, right, easy. Improved reviews. If you have a good application, people will go and say, hey, this is really good, start using this. And this is very much out there when you look at applications which are more in fighting for the market. So for example, in Australia we have Uber Eats, we have DoorDash, we have Foodora. So we have all of these applications which ultimately they're all doing the same thing. And the same thing is transport food from a restaurant to your home. So which one are you going to be using? I frankly use Uber because it was already incorporated in the whole system. I use Uber as well, so it uses the same account. I find the interface to be much more convenient, and it's just nice and easy to use. So for me, I open it. I don't need to be trained. I just go and use it, which is something that I did not find, for example, when I moved on to other applications like DoorDash. So I had DoorDash once, never had it again. Bad experience. So, simpler and therefore less expensive documentation. More effective or efficient designers and developers. Fewer operational errors like fewer user problems, fewer injuries, fewer legal problems. Standards, legislation, certification. So, central to UCD is to analyze users and their world, evaluate ideas, test to ensure the design actually works with users, and then you iterate. Design, prototype, evaluate to form a reflective iterative cycle. Over many iterations, a rich picture emerges. This is essentially a learning process. What do we mean? That what we start with at the beginning may not be what we end up at the end. Remember, if you want, you can go and have a look at the work of Donald Norman, who has a number of publications and books and interesting videos about this. Summary. UCD process focuses on the user, places the user, their goals, needs and activities at the core of the design process, and significant aspects of this approach are the cyclic aspects of iteration and evaluation, and it is not a linear nor a rigid process. So, what I want you to take home today is the fact that you need to design by starting with simple things, and you need to try and test just one thing. Do not try to solve all of the problem in one go, but try to start solving the problem one piece at a time. And if you are on the right track, then you keep on solving larger and larger part of the problem. So this is the basic design process. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.